This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, and welcome to The Reality Check, the Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. I'm your host, Darren McKee, and with me, as usual, is Adam Gardner.
Oh, what's up, Cuboids?
We have a great show for you today. I'm going to give you a brief book review roundup talking about surveillance and quantum mechanics. But first, Adam, why don't Europeans use air conditioning?
It's a great question, Darren. Let me briefly start my segment as I had originally planned it when I wrote this a month ago. It's summer here in the Northern Hemisphere, and in the summer it's hot. I wrote this, 5-6 weeks ago. We were having hot days.
So we're recording this in September, and that was probably written in July.
Yeah, and it's probably going to come out in October. So I rewrote my intro, and let me take it from the top. We had a hot summer here in Canada.
Truth.
With a bunch of particularly hot days. There are a lot of ways to beat the heat. A cool drink, removing your shirt, ice cream, or air conditioning.
Or all together.
Oh yeah, you can do all of those. Shirtless, ice cream eating, cold drink, air conditioning. Fantastic. It's like a float, maybe?
Apply ice cream directly to the back of your neck.
Ooh, nice. So air conditioning is common here in Canada and the US, but it seems less common in Europe. What's that about? Every summer I hear news of incredible heat waves in England threatening to literally kill people who live there. And then there's this discourse around it, which is all weird, like, oh, it's 30 degrees and you guys are dying? What's going on, guys? Come on, you can't handle it? 30 degrees Celsius being 86 Fahrenheit.
But not just England.
Oh, yeah, elsewhere in Europe for sure. And then the response is like, oh, you silly Americans, we don't have AC here. And then I wonder, well, why not, guys? What's the deal?
What's the deal with Europe?
So I was born in 1978. I consider air conditioning to be a bit of a modern luxury. So I don't recall exactly when. I think my parents got air conditioning at their place, probably around 2000 while I was living there. Before that, we'd just be hot. I'd just be hot all the time.
I remember this because I didn't have that either.
You're just like in your underwear in the basement.
It's warm. Like, well, I'm going to wet the front of my shirt before I go to bed and I'll sit in front of a fan.
Yeah. So I had some friends, that had AC earlier. I just don't recall it being that widespread when I was young. Like in the 80s, I don't know if I knew anyone who had air conditioning. Like, in the 90s, yeah. So surely this is not universal in the US. About 88% of homes had some sort of air conditioning as of 2020. In Canada, the number was 64%, about 2/3 of that in 2021. So this will, of course, vary by location. Most Canadians, for example, don't live that far from the US border, where it's often quite warm in the summer. Canada's capital of Ottawa tends to be quite cold, with our winters seeming to be much longer than our short summers. Because it's further up north, the summers can be that much hotter. AC will not be run year-round, but for 2 or 3 months of the year, it's pretty nice to have. There are always a few weeks where it's really warm, so warm that not having air conditioning could present a health risk for some people. But even in Canada, it's not all about latitude. Someone lives in Vancouver or Vancouver Island, Victoria, something like that. They have very mild winters, little to no snow, less extreme summers. Newfoundland, similarly, it's usually very cold in the winter and pretty cool summers as well. Proximity to a large lake or ocean will have a big effect on the local weather and temperatures. Living in places like this, one might be able to go with air conditioning compared to something like Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, which has more of the kind of winters and summers that I'm used to.
Yes, but a quick little thing there is that with Toronto and Ottawa as comparators, Ottawa has far more precipitation than Toronto. Mm-hmm. So that means both more rain in the summer and more snow in the winter, which then also leads to humidity.
Yeah. And of course, if you live further up north in places like Nunavut or something like that, it just doesn't even get that warm in the summer. But in the US, our neighbors to the south, they have very hot weather year-round in some places. And of course, there's going to be heat waves, times where it gets particularly warm. A lot of the northern U.S. has pretty similar climate to what we deal with in the more populated areas of Canada. Now, Europe, of course, is a vast continent with varied weather. The topic often seems centered on England specifically, but other places, other countries in Europe. In this case, the simple answer to why don't you guys have AC over there seems to be, well, they usually don't need it. Common summer temperatures are cooler than, say, Ottawa. So-called heat waves make headlines, and those temperatures being that hot is for that area, it's actually quite hot. It may be exceptional for some temperature experienced in England that wouldn't really make headlines in other places in Canada or the US. If a person can tolerate a few hot days that don't even occur every summer, they might not really need AC. And there are practical reasons as well. I've lived in a few places where AC was differently convenient, right? So as I mentioned, I didn't have AC growing up, but when we did, basically my parents just got a big central air conditioning unit. It sent cool air to the ducts that were already there for the heating for the furnace. So pretty easy to adapt that place. It gets cold in the winter in Ottawa, so, we had, for example, a gas-powered furnace. Some different places will have different ones. This is common in a lot of places that I've lived in. It varies depending where you are. In apartments, I'd install a window unit, which basically keeps one room too cold and the others too hot. I lived in a condo, and I lived in 3 different houses that had central air conditioning. They're basically built in the house when it was built because they were built like 21st century. But Europe's old. Lots of people in London and other big cities in Europe might live in a building that's literally hundreds of years old. So you can't easily retrofit an older building to have AC. And if you did, it would be costly. Like you can heat these places with local sort of baseboard heaters, anything like that. Not as easy to localize your cool.
No.
So get a window unit? Okay, well, that's well and good if you've got a big window for it. A window AC unit is a very large device which is installed into a big open window. Sometimes you need to put a piece of wood or plexiglass to fit the gap. You got to fiddle around with it. It's not always ideal.
Trying to picture someone putting one of those in a castle.
That would be very cool. They're a little drafty, I think, for the window AC. So I've struggled to get this set up in a few places that I've lived, and installing and removing them every year is a bit of a pain. You're probably better off just leaving it there if you don't mind. If you don't have access to the outside, something like a balcony, there's a risk that it could like fall off, land on someone, kill somebody, or just break or something terrible like that. And some windows won't accommodate these at all. This is a problem in England and presumably many other places. They often don't have large windows which you can open. Maybe a window has only a small part that opens at the top, or it'll only open just a little bit. In my current house, I have these annoying windows that open like a door at an angle, so I wouldn't be able to put a window AC unit if I needed to, but I don't need to because I have central air. In many places, if a window is low enough to the floor on an upper level, you can't open the windows very wide because they don't want kids falling out and stuff like that. There's usually ways to bypass that particular functionality, but yeah, not great for AC. So there's just a lot of reasons for which a window may not work with a window AC unit. And whenever I lived in an apartment, I was always in an older place that had older windows, and they kind of opened in a way that accommodated an air conditioning unit. So if the building is bad for central air and the window is bad for a big window unit, you can get a portable air conditioning unit. Basically, instead of putting it right in the window or the wall, you just put a tube which goes into the window. You kind of need a piece of wood to block a sliver of the window or something, plexiglass or something like that. These are convenient, but they're not very strong. It's hard to keep cool because the small tube has a limited amount of air that comes in and out. It also creates a lot of water because it removes the humidity from the air. You can fill a bucket with it. I spent the summer of 2018 in a small space over a horse stable, which was just like a large room. And I had 2 portable AC units, and I had to get up in the middle of the night to empty the buckets of water because it was creating so much. So that's not ideal, obviously. But, if there's only a few hot days, maybe it's manageable. So if you live in a country where AC is uncommon and usually unnecessary and not really part of the culture, well, you probably wouldn't easily be able to find this kind of unit anyway. Here in Canada, you just walk in a Canadian Tire, you can pick one up. I don't know if that's quite as easy in the UK. So I guess we can address the whole climate change question too. Air conditioning uses electricity. Many sources of electricity produce carbon emissions, which cause global warming, which is bad and contribute to needing more air conditioning. It's a bit of a vicious cycle there. Well, yes, climate change is a thing, and part of living with that, as far as I'm concerned, is to use things like air conditioning to be able to survive the warmer climates that we're creating. Yes, it would be great if we didn't need to, but we need to be realistic. So the environmental impact of the electricity used for AC is given as a reason not to use it. I get that. But they also heat places in Europe, and this similarly uses electricity. This will depend on where you live, of course. My air conditioning is powered by hydroelectric dams, which don't use emissions, but I heat through gas in the winter. So it's probably environmentally friendly to cool my house, but less environmentally friendly to heat it. And it's not to say that heat isn't also a consideration in Europe. Traditionally, it's shaped their culture in many important ways. Take, for example, the siesta, a midday rest common in many countries, originating largely in Spain and being observed in countries colonized by the Spanish. In Italy, they have the riposo, I traveled to Italy years ago. I was surprised to find all the stores were closed in the early afternoon. This kind of thing is common throughout the Mediterranean, Southern Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. And one reason for which siestas are observed in some cultures is that it's warm in the afternoons and also in places where a large lunch is eaten. So basically, historically, you couldn't have people working hard labor in fields and such when it was really warm in the early afternoon. This ends up meaning that they'll eat dinner much later. Again, a surprise in my trip to Italy when I wanted to get dinner at something like 6:30 p.m. and they were like, "Oh no, you have to sit a while and have a drink because we haven't opened our kitchen yet and we can't order food." Okay. So Darren, you've done a lot of traveling, a lot more traveling than me. Is this something you noticed in a lot of places?
The siestas or the painful heat waves?
Both, I guess, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bit of the siesta. Sometimes you just can't find something open when you would normally expect it to be. Certainly in, parts of Europe. And then heat wave, I've definitely got caught by at least one, if not two.
Yeah.
And because they didn't have air conditioning, it was terrible.
Yeah.
Person I was traveling with didn't bother them. There was two fans. I had both of them going on me all night. And they're like, "I'm fine." And I slept with a blanket. I was like, oh man, I just envy other people sometimes in their temperature systems. But I find it very unpleasant. So some people like it hot, and I am not one of them.
Yeah, I guess different people have different sort of core temperatures, and that that's obviously a common men-woman issue. And I think adult child, depending on the size of your body and your surface area, all sorts of things are gonna affect this, right?
I mean, walking around, I don't know, unless you're at a beach, I don't need anything close to 30 degrees.
Yeah,
forget it.
Yeah,
walking around 15 degrees is better.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'd mostly agree with that. Yes. So air conditioning is a luxury and a comfort, but it's also a health issue. People can and do die of heat exposure every year. And as it happens, this is much more common in Europe than in North America. While it's much hotter in the US than in Europe, heat-related deaths are much more common throughout Europe. Now, the numbers vary, so there'll be a bit of a range here, but still, you can get the general idea. One source I saw said that 175,000 people die every year in Europe due to heat. Other sources give smaller numbers, such as a particularly high number of deaths in 2022 being 61,000. So, obviously there's a big factor there. To contrast that, on a particularly hot year, 2023, for example, 2,325 people died in the US of heat, with the number being close to 1,000 many years.
That is a lot less.
It's a lot less. So Europe has more than twice as many people in the US, and depending on what you look at, up to 100 times more people dying of heat exposure. Maybe it's lower and it's more like 20, but it's still quite a bit more.
That's a huge factor difference.
Yeah. It just doesn't compare.
In case people are curious, there's 750 million people in Europe. And almost 350 in the States.
Yeah. So to put it differently, the US, according to one estimate, had about 5 heat-related deaths per million people. Another estimate I saw gave a higher number, between 32 and 35, depending on the year. Okay, so that's the number of deaths per million. For 2023, it was a hot year in Europe. In Greece, it was 393 per million. Ooh. Bulgaria, 229 per million. Italy, 209 per million. Spain, 173 per million. Cyprus, 167 per million. And it goes down a bit. But, that's significantly higher than what's going on in the States.
It's flipping the gun-related homicide rate.
Yes. I've also seen it suggested that a reason for which people don't have AC in Europe is that it's almost a point of pride, right? So the US is seen as sort of wasteful and decadent by indulging in a luxury of using air conditioning, and the people, in Europe can kind of get by without it. So maybe this is true. But evidently there are thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people who are not actually getting by without it and die from heat exposure. So I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just saying, if you're particularly vulnerable to the health effects of heat, especially if you're older or you live in a city where it gets really hot in the summer, air conditioning might not be a terrible idea for your health, right? There are things we do for our health. We take vaccines, we fasten our seatbelts, things like that. It's not shameful to do that. There are options, as I mentioned, including portable air conditioners. Maybe if it's very rare, you can just whip that out on the really hot days. There are, of course, other ways to stay cool. The World Health Organization, for example, doesn't want to give AC as their main option, so they suggest things like opening your windows at night, closing them in the day, using fans if it's under 40 Celsius, taking cold showers, things like that. But AC is an option. Don't let people convince you otherwise. This is, of course, my perspective as a Canadian. I know we have listeners from around the world. Some of them are in Canada and the US. Some are in Europe. Of course, we have people elsewhere that probably have different issues with air conditioning. And if you're in the South, well, your winter's coming to an end right now. So you're probably going to care more about this in a few months. So feel free to drop us a line at info@trcpodcast.com. Give us your own perspective. You think there's something about where you live that I've kind of missed out on. Air conditioning. It's not widely used everywhere, but it saves lives in places where it gets really hot. There's no simple answer for why it's used more in one place than another, but many factors contribute to cultural norms which make it more or less common, as well as practical issues like age of buildings, rules about windows, all sorts of things like that. If, like me, you don't want to die, air conditioning is one proven way to avoid dying of heat.
Yes, well done. And you're right, there's a lot of cultural factors here where once the society embraces air conditioning, it's a lot easier to find an air conditioner. It's a lot easier to have one installed. It's a lot easier to have a home that's suitable for this and that. But with climate stuff, it's not going to get better in the near future.
Nope.
So I think if someone was prudent and prepared, I think someone mentioned this like 5 to 10 years ago, they had air conditioning installed because they live in Europe, because they thought, well, this is only going to get worse. And it certainly has.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have air conditioning growing up, and arguably it was less necessary because it wasn't as warm. And it's unfortunate, and I think people kind of have this attitude of like, you have to like do your penance or suffer for climate change or whatever. But like, no, if you want to be healthy and comfortable, despite the terrible things that are happening, air conditioning is one way to mitigate it. And it's kind of necessary for humans.
And a lot of Europe uses more renewable energy.
Yep.
So the electricity for the air conditioning shouldn't be as carbon intensive. So that should be a variable there. But yeah, sometimes people, I said, point of pride. We don't usually do this, but I'm almost going to like share what I would do behind the scenes, but in real time. So when I made that comment about gun-related homicides in EAC, I'm thinking through the numbers now. So off the top of my head, I think there's 30 to 40,000 homicide deaths gun-related in the States each year.
Okay.
If that's the case, then we would double it because, as you said, the population has to equal out, which makes it closer to 80,000 max, we'll say. But then there's way more than 80,000 people dying from heat in Europe, because you said it was like 170,000, right?
And all considered, I think there's actually a lot more people that die of cold. I looked at some stats about that, and they said mild cold, not even like extreme cold, just like mild cold. People die of cold a lot more often. So maybe having adequate heat is actually more important, or very important as well.
I'll put a pin in that for a split second. So just looking it up now, yes, the numbers in the US are about 45,000, 46,000, 48,000 each year. Mm-hmm. So even if we bump that to 100,000 for the population, you have a greater risk of dying from heat in Europe than you do from getting shot in the States. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Now, of course, context matters, right? This is gang-related stuff, and if you're healthy and you're not in a hot place, yes. But I just think the overall stat might shock some people, say in Europe, and like, oh yeah, well, we're not like those other people. Like, well, do you want to be worse than getting shot at in the States? Mm-hmm. Also, since Adam just mentioned it in terms of cold or heat-related deaths, good old episode of The Reality Check, number 367, from back in 2015, actually September 2015, which was about 10 years ago, I covered deaths from heat and cold. Oh. So if anyone's curious, you could have a listen to that.
Oh, I wonder if there's any repeats. I already said.
I'm pretty sure I didn't cover anything to do with Europe. Okay. It wasn't about air conditioning.
Yeah.
But it probably does conclude saying, yeah, cold can be worse. It's just that it can be harder to get some data. Now, in the 10 years hence or since, there probably is more data, better available data now than there was then.
Excellent. Well, I'll put that in the show notes because future Adam's going to edit this show, and then he'll remember, look up 367, put in the show notes, and we'll see.
There you go. One more little behind-the-scenes tidbit before we leave this segment. By the way, listeners, before we record this show, we have to make sure there's less ambient noise in the background. So I turn off my fridge, but we also turn off the air conditioner in the summer. So that means sometimes when a show comes out in the summer, Adam and I have gotten increasingly warm while we've been recording it. All just to bring you the goods and myth-busting that we do. Yeah,
we'll do 2 shows, and we'll take a break and turn on the AC full blast for like 5-10 minutes between, and then it's a little tolerable. We turn it off. Yeah, it's there's a whole process. Yeah.
Indeed there is. Well, thank you, Adam.
Cool.
And now we turn to book reviews. As you know, listeners, I read some books and like to talk to you about them. This time I'm going to review fewer books, and I'm also not going to give you the AI summary. Just pure Darren's thoughts. Imagine that.
Excellent.
So the first book is The Ethics of Privacy and Surveillance by Carissa Velez. It's an excellent work of analytical philosophy. Clear, linear, well-structured, and cogent. The first half is primarily definitional. Different conceptualizations of what privacy is and their flaws before presenting her hybrid account. This will be interesting or tedious depending on the reader. It is a work of philosophy. The second half is easier to read, more about the applicability of her theory and more of a real-world focus. For her hybrid account of privacy, in brief, she argues that, quote, an adequate theory of privacy should incorporate both access and control elements. Privacy itself and losses thereof are better explained by an access theory, while the right to privacy and violations thereof are better explained by appealing to control. This largely makes sense given how we use and understand the terms and the real-world situations we want to describe, and she appropriately dealt with various objections. That said, there could have been more cross-cultural analysis and a longer discussion about whether the younger generation's preferences count as privacy loss or not.
Oh, okay. So do you get the sense that younger people care less about privacy than older due to getting a trade-off?
Because they just give everything to the tech companies.
Okay.
Basically, they sign away almost like they can listen in, they can do this, see it very differently.
Yeah, okay.
And by the way, just to quickly clarify in case it wasn't too clear, access is, how much access do you have to information versus how much do you have control of it. Oh, and that's what I mean in terms of both access and control elements, because they're not quite the same thing. Wisely, the author highlighted the upside of surveillance and contrasted that with privacy. That's what makes it ethically interesting, after all. I appreciated her reasonable arguments on the surveillance delusion, the mistaken belief that surveillance has no significant moral costs, and the ways in which various entities that are supposedly acting to protect people can make us less safe. There was also an interesting exploration of the privacy duties we have regarding others, something one often does but rarely thinks about explicitly. Useful content for idea generation and reflection. So, for example, if you encounter a situation out in the world and maybe people are having an argument, do you pay attention or do you not? It's like, well...
You pretend not to.
You pretend not to. You kind of listen. Now, they're kind of... By them doing it in public, they are giving up a certain right to privacy that otherwise would have. But in other contexts, there's numerous ways in which we do give people their space.
Yes.
And we kind of just do it naturally, and it would be invasive if we did otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
In short, I thought this was a solid work of philosophy that meshes the analytical and conceptual with a very practical topic.
Interesting.
Great book. Mm-hmm. But if you aren't that interested in works of philosophy, don't get it, because you won't like it. It'll be too dry. Then there was the book, What is Real? The Unfinished Quest for the Meaning of Quantum Physics.
Oh, boy.
This came out in 2018 by Adam Becker.
Oh, so it's already outdated.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes and no.
That's a joke idea.
Yeah. So I first went through this in 2019 and then just went through it again this summer because it was a work of fiction that dealt with quantum mechanics and I wanted a refresher because I rember this book being good. I did write a short review in 2025. I think I have a better review in 2019. So
cognitive decline, Darren.
I'm going to say it's effort, not decline, but thank you.
Sure.
So I said this book is an excellent exploration of quantum mechanics that combines good scientific explanations with an interesting narrative about the key players and even key ideas. The main argument Becker wanted to make and succeeded at making is that the Copenhagen interpretation has fundamental problems. What exactly does the collapse of the waveform mean? And what is an observer? There is nothing even close to consensus on this. These problems existed at the time, it was like 100 years ago, and they still exist now.
100 years. Wow.
Well, 80 to 100, yeah.
Yeah,
Due to complexity, confusion, deference, or laziness, most physicists either don't know these problems exist or don't care.
Wow.
Shut up and calculate has been a mantra because quantum mechanics works, but we don't know why what is happening. Some of the smartest humans I've read about can't figure this out or agree with each other, so I feel even more strongly that I should be very wary of saying anything about quantum mechanics at all. I will also mention that I'm now more sympathetic to silly New Age interpretations of quantum mechanics that emphasize the importance of human consciousness because John von Neumann thought the consciousness was key.
Oh, wow. That's a smart guy.
Oh, well. Yeah. There's a famous situation where John von Neumann wrote a proof which supposedly supported the Copenhagen and took out this competing theory, but he made a mistake in it. But because he's von Neumann, everyone just assumed he got it right.
Oh, that's so funny. No one checked his work.
No, well, they didn't even read, like, John von Neumann took care of it, right?
The case is closed.
Yeah.
Good job, Johnny.
So back in that time in 2019, I said there's a much more informative review that I recommend reading, so we can link that in the show notes as well. And then, 2025, I just said it's the best book on the history and interpretation of quantum mechanics written for an educated layperson that I've read. It was still excellent. It's certainly this person's understanding of the history and the context. In a way, it's more of a work of history than just straight up quantum mechanics, but you really get a sense of how science works and, unfortunately, how it doesn't work because it deals with people and personalities, and we're all humans, and I think the science is the best game in town, but fundamentally, it is a bunch of apes trying to figure things out, and there will be limitations. Mm-hmm. I'll quickly mention another book called Good and Real, Demystifying Paradoxes from Physics to Ethics by Gary Drescher. So this was read around a similar time years ago because it's also about quantum mechanics and trying to talk about the many worlds interpretation. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I thought this failed to demystify much of anything because of Drescher's inaccessible presentation of material and a breadth of content beyond his ability to explicate.
Oh.
I also think that one's metaphysical worldview is linked to an understanding of physics and consciousness and causality and morality, but it is very difficult to explain this and explore each of the issues in detail in one book that isn't a couple thousand pages.
Yeah.
It starts off well, with a seemingly rigorous approach and important points made about how to discuss the issues clearly. But then his analogies to explain consciousness or the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics are largely unhelpful. I admire his ambition, and I do think he understands the material in great detail. It's just that I wasn't able to join him through his words in this book. Years ago, there were 2 different book group meetings about this book, and we all largely felt it wasn't worth finishing and not well written.
Ooh,
I didn't finish it and can't recommend it. Instead, if you're curious about these issues, please check out Dennett's Elbow Room, which is about free will and determinism, or Becker's What is Real. I will just quickly say, of course, that's my opinion. I know 1 or 2 other friends, they really like this book, but it just wasn't for me and some other people. So you can take that for what it's worth. But definitely the first book about surveillance was excellent, and this other book, What is Real, was solid.
Excellent. Sounds like 2 books might be worth checking out there.
Well, thanks for joining us once again, listeners. Adam showed us that air conditioning is a cool idea. And you know what also is? Reading. Enjoy the book reviews. Until next time, think better, act better.
Peace out, cool boys.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TRC_podcast.
Outtakes.
So the first book is... Damn it.
I thought it was 2 books on the 2 topics you mentioned. Obviously, it's 1 book on one topic and another on the other.
Yeah, what you thought one book was?
Just the way you said it was
quantum mechanics.
Yeah. So I read 2 books on surveillance and quantum mechanics. Who knew there were 2 books with such a combined topic? It's just
what an interesting idea.
Imagine being afraid of.
That's such a funny. You just clip that. Adam's hot takes. Stream of consciousness.
Is it too political?
Until next time. Well, I should do a summary. So,
peace out, cool boys.
So that's not bad. Is there something else before you stop it?
Yeah.
Is there something like with
I was thinking of qubits, but you didn't talk about qubits.
It like refrigoids or like like frigoids or is it freon? What goes into air conditioning? What is it? Because it used to be.
Oh, it's not freon anymore. It's some sort of coolant. It's some sort of synthetic chemical coolant. It basically
What is the chemical in air conditioners that makes things cool?
It just basically needs to exist in a gaseous state, at near room temperature. That's kind of the important thing.
Common refrigerants include freon.
Yeah.
And in older units, puron.
Puron? I don't even know what the
You could say freoids.
freonoids.
You could say refrigoids, or you could just keep it as you did.
Yeah. No, I think it's fine.
I kind of like refrigoids, but that's
refrigoids.
Because it doesn't really make sense. No, it doesn't. Although a refrigerator is.
A refrigerator is off. Oh yes, it is a cuboid. I'm seeing that. Yeah, it's like vending machine shape.
If you're done, we could just stop.
Yeah, we'll stop the recording.
Okay.